County. And he's going to talk to us tonight about farmland conservation. So Charles, I am going to turn it over to you.
All right. Well, thank you for having me tonight, Sarah. Does anyone, I'd like to get a real quick survey of the folks that are on. Are there any burning questions you have about tax credits or easements that pop right out? Okay, if not, go ahead. Isaac, do you have a?
Well, I don't have any specific questions. I feel like I am so ignorant of the subject that I would appreciate just kind of a basic intro first to the concept. I love the idea of farmland conservation, but I don't know enough about it to really have useful questions.
Okay, all right. Well, the presentation that I've got put together for y'all tonight, we're going to kind of walk through it fairly slow, but if you have any questions, just stop me. You know, we can keep this really informal, especially since we have a smaller group. But when we think about farmland conservation, the easements are kind of the big thing that people are really excited about and have questions about because they generate tax credits. But there are also many other tools that are available to be used to preserve farmland. Our land provides us with a renewable resource, nourishment and fiber, a sustainable natural environment, jobs and economy, recreation and tourism. There's also many historic districts around the state that are just tilted just for that reason, to save and protect historic resources within the Commonwealth. So our lands kind of connect our past and sets the course for a prosperous future. But again, there are many tools that are available. Like every county, maybe not every county, but I think just about every county in the state now is required to have a comprehensive plan. It's kind of a long range planning document. And most counties now have zoning, which kind of affects where different types of development can occur in the county. I know here in Louisa and many of the other counties around the state have special designation districts, like historic districts. Here in Louisa, we have one called the Historic Green Springs, and that covers about 14,000 acres of the county here in Louisa that's strictly dedicated towards historical preservation and open space preservation of farmland. You also have ag and forestal districts. Oh, Ralph is wanting in, Sarah. He must have got my message. But land protection tools like ag and forestal districts, they are quite common around the state. And those are short-term easements where you can put your farmland in an ag district for, say, 10 years and then re-up it every 10 years. There are no tax credits developed or derived from that, but there is a tax savings usually, because it guarantees, if you're in an ag and forestal district, that you're going to maintain land use taxation, which is another very important tool that we use, you know, for farmland preservation, because it takes the tax burden off of the farmers compared to getting taxed like it was development land, for example. There's also purchase of land by public parks and different counties, as well as federal agencies. There's also, some counties have purchase of development rights, or PDRs, where they have money set aside in their annual budget. The state of Virginia kicks in some money, usually in those programs. I think Albemarle County is the closest county to us that actually has a program like that, where they could give you a cash transaction. And basically, it takes the development rights away from that property to keep it growing cows and pigs and grass instead of growing houses, for example. Another important tool that we really haven't heard a whole lot the last 4 or 5 years, because there's been such a push to do away with the estate tax. But with the new administration in Washington now, there's talk about bringing the estate tax back. So, as we think about family planning and estate tax planning, easements can really help with that because it lowers the threshold from where those taxes can be applied. Sarah, it says that Ralph is in the waiting room. Did you get him?
Yeah, I think he's having some, looks like he's trying to connect to the audio. I got him.
I got you. Hi, Ralph. State and local initiatives. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but there's some of the different rivers in the state. They have, little associations that have been put together. I know like up along the Rappahannock River and some of the other big important rivers in the state, they have scenic river groups that will actually purchase your like shoreline, not purchase it, but just take an easement on it to protect it so that it stays fully protected and available for future generations. And then, of course, land use taxation. And I know not every county has it, but it is an extremely valuable resource for farmers in a community because it allows us to have lower taxes. We still pay the same rate, but it has to do with the appraised value or assessed value that land is taxed at. So it's taxed at the land use rate, what is good for farmland, versus as if I was going to divide it up and put houses on it. So these are kind of some of the different protection tools that are out there. But tonight we're going to stick pretty much primarily to conservation easements. Virginia is one of 4 states that actually has transferable tax credits. In other words, you can put your farm under easement, and by doing so, it generates a tax credit that you can convert to real cash. So in my personal example myself, I don't claim to be an expert on this by any means, but with our farming operation, when I graduated from college, my brother and myself, we had a family farm that was roughly about 300 acres that we went back to. And we've used the tax credit program here in Virginia to basically expand our land base. Now we own almost 1,800 acres compared to the 300 that we had, 30 years ago when we graduated. But it has helped us a bunch, and I look at it as a great tool that can help expand an existing operation, protect an operation from estate tax liability, and you still own your land. That's the whole beauty of it. But we'll go over that a little bit more as we get through the conversation. But you can see on the slide, all these other states in green, they have tax credits. But the difference with Virginia's, Colorado's, New Mexico's, and South Carolina's, our program is transferable. Because me as a farmer and an extension agent, I didn't need tax credits. I don't make enough money to really use them. But I can transfer those or sell those to third parties like lawyers, doctors, all kinds of folks in investment vehicles, accountants, different things like that actually can use those tax credits, and it lowers their tax bill to the state of Virginia because they buy. So we'll go over that a little more in detail and go through a couple of examples. What is a conservation easement? Now, it's a voluntary agreement, okay, between the landowner and a land trust or a government agency that you're going to hold your easement. So just like, and they look exactly like this document on the left on this slide, this is a deed of conservation easement. Now, typically they're 15 to 20 pages long. It's got a lot of flowery language. It talks about, preserving open space and how this is good for the Commonwealth of Virginia, to keep this land open for future generations, for farming and view sheds and you name it. I mean, it's got to have some kind of public benefit. Otherwise, they wouldn't be willing to give you a tax credit for it. But where most people get really confused, I want you to think about owning land. What does it mean? And think of a bundle of sticks. And just like this bundle of sticks on this slide, You've got the right to build homes, mineral rights. So we don't think about mineral rights too much around here because there's not a lot of mining or oil drilling or gas. But if you go out west, mineral rights, oftentimes you own the ranch, but you don't own the minerals below the soil. In Virginia, it's different. We do. So when you buy a piece of property, 9 times out of 10, the mineral rights are included in that bundle of sticks, that the rights that you get when you own that property, that ownership bundle. There's access rights. There's the right to sell, the right to divide, the right of what type of building that you build on it or how much construction you can put on it. So all these rights are in this bundle that we're given through what's basically Old English law. And when you do an easement, all you're doing is pulling out one stick of that bundle. And that's the ability to develop it or subdivide it. And you don't have to do it all at one time, but the more you're willing to do, the more that it's worth. And we'll go over that. So, but again, the thing that you need to remember is a conservation easement is forever. It's not like ag and forestal districts. When you think about ag and forestal districts, they're temporary, they're 10-year spans. When you do an easement on a property, it actually, just like it says in that document there on the page, deed of conservation easement, it attaches to the deed at your courthouse, whatever county you're in, it attaches to your deed. So laying out the basic ground rules, that's kind of how the thing works. Now, typical easement restrictions: division of property, buildings and structures, building development envelopes. I just recently completed a project that we're in the process of selling the tax credits on right now, where we had to put building development envelopes. This farm that I have, I had to go in and designate the areas where there could be future construction. So that was something I'd never done. We've been through this process 6 times on 6 different farms. I never had to deal with building development envelopes, but this time I did, because there's been a new tax law change. Some folks in the easement community don't think you have to have them. My attorney that I deal with thought it was a great idea, and we followed his advice, and I'm glad we did, because there's been an IRS tax court case that came down just in the last year that absolutely reinforced the idea that building development envelopes should be included in the property. So that there's no doubt is if you want to give, your daughter or your son 5 acres on the back hill to build a house, that's where that's going to be. So it helps eliminate confusion and problems. Because kind of like anything with contract law and easements, you don't want to leave it gray. You want it to be black and white. You want it to be very apparent what you can do, what you can't do, what you can do with permission. Those are kind of the different levels. Industrial and commercial activities, sometimes they're restricted. Forest management. If you do an easement with the Virginia Department of Forestry, which is one of the different easement holders in the state, I believe with theirs, there's a certain percentage of the woodland that you have to remain in woodland. In other words, if you cut the timber off, you have to replant it in pine. You can't convert it to, say, pasture land or crop land. So, but that's one type of easement that's out there. Riparian buffers. Most of the easements are going to call for riparian buffers or best management practices along streams and creeks. Most easements are going to restrict grading, blasting, or mining. So no pit mines, no fracking, all that kind of stuff usually is excluded in most of the easements that I've been around. But again, I want to stress, even though I'm talking about these different things, every easement is negotiable. You can work with your attorney and with the land trust that you are working with, and nothing's cast in stone. There's things that can be changed to make it better for you or worse for you. It's up to you. But we'll talk more about that as we move forward too. Trash and dumping is not permitted on most easements. And also most easements that I've seen have restrictions on sign size. And like you can't have a, huge billboard or a 20 by 20 sign out in your field or whatever. Most of them restrict them down to like an 8 by 8 or something, but every easement's different that way. But the common myths about easements, it is for public benefit. Okay, that has to be part of the language for the benefit of the public, that you're putting this under easement to qualify for the tax deductions and the credits. But that doesn't mean you have to grant public access to your land. That is a fallacy that some people confuse. Now, your land trusts, like if you go with Virginia Outdoors Foundation or Piedmont Environmental Council or Historic Green Springs or Land Trust of Virginia, they have certain custodial things that they have to do to make sure that the easement is in line and being done correctly. Like, for example, the issue there a minute ago about buildings or the size of buildings or trash dumping. They might have to do a periodic review, maybe once every 5 years or something like that, or 10 years or whatever, to make sure that you're sticking to the spirit of the easement that you put on the property. People say, well, if I put an easement on my land, I can't sell it. That's not true. You can sell it. You can give it away. You can sell it to whoever you want to. But remember, that deed of easement that we talked about a little while ago attaches to the deed and it transfers to the new owner. I'll give you an example here in Louisa. We had a very historic house that had been well preserved and taken care of by all the different landowners. And the guy from New York bought it and he moved in there, and he was a big attorney and he thought he didn't have to live by the letter of the law. And remember, the district here is a historic district. So the integrity of that 250-year-old house is very important. In other words, you can't just go and rip the siding off of it and paint it purple. It's going to have to be, there's certain things that have to happen to keep that property kind of in shape like it was. I mean, you can fix it up, don't get me wrong, but you can't change the aesthetics of the whole community. Well, that's exactly what he did. And it went all the way to the state Supreme Court, and he thought he could fight it, and he lost. And he ended up having to fix the house back like the exterior was, pay to do all that. And then he ended up moving because he didn't like the restrictions, but the restrictions are permanent. You can't choose. Once you put them on there, they're forever. You can't take them off, okay? Not you, not any future landowner, not any future heir. So that's one thing to remember. You can't farm or hunt or fish. That's crazy. You can do that. You can do whatever you want to do on your land as long as it's not excluded in the easement. Harvest timber. That's, you can absolutely harvest your timber whenever you need to. But then you get into other things that have nothing to do with the easement. You have to file the right forms at the FSA. If you want to harvest timber to convert it to cropland, so that you don't get in trouble with your Farm Service Agency rules and regulations and stuff. And also in terms of harvesting timber, Virginia has a seed tree law. So if you cut pine, it's got to go back into pine. I believe it's within 3 years, unless you want to convert it to farmland. And do that, then you have to file the proper paperwork with Farm Service Agency. You can pass it on to your heirs. You can plant what you want. You can do what you want. Every easement is a little different. So, those restrictions, you need to know what you're doing up front. That's why it's good to have a good attorney. And negotiating. Easements can be a flexible tool. You got to have a good attorney to know how to protect your interest as you put this permanent document on your property. So negotiations are very typical on most of these easements. They're not necessarily cast in stone. Virginia Outdoors Foundation has a great format. They call it the farmstead easement. That's where you get to designate a large area on the farm as the farmstead. You can build whatever buildings you want to without restriction and without asking anybody to support your farming operation. So one of the easements that we just did, I put a farmstead on one of them because if I want to put turkey houses or chicken houses or a beef feedlot, I don't have to ask them in Richmond. I can just go do it. I just got to get my local county permits to do it. Who holds the conservation easements? I mentioned Virginia Outdoors Foundation. That is the largest holder of easements in the state. It's kind of a quasi-government agency, but they hold a whole lot of the easements. Virginia Department of Forestry has a ton of easements, mostly on forest land. DCR, and also the federal agencies now, like FSA, NRCS, they can do a whole farm easement through them. I think it's got to be approved in Washington, but that's a pretty good program that guy could sure think about. Local governments, there are many local governments now that are purchasing development rights from farmers and landowners. That's another way. And then probably the most common one that's around the area here would be like in Louisa is the historic Green Springs, but you also have the New River Land Trust, the Piedmont Environmental Council, which I think works all up and down the valley and over into Northern Virginia, the Land Trust of Virginia. That is one that is really easy to use, and the Nature Conservancy. And there's many, many others. But in all cases, the holder must have a commitment to protect the conservation purposes of the donation and the resources to enforce the restriction. That's what I was talking about earlier. You're giving up certain things on your bundle of ownership. You're one of those sticks that you're giving away. Their job is to be the steward of that forever. So a lot of times there's a charge that they put on in the beginning when they agree to take your easement. There's not with Virginia Outdoors Foundation, but I know like with the Land Trust of Virginia, for example, they have a larger fee up front, but they also have a whole lot less strings and a whole lot less rules compared to some of the other tighter agencies. So why do landowners donate easements? Well, I know I can say from our perspective, we love the land. And I think that's the case with most people because you are giving up some economic value. I mean, if you think about it, every piece of land anywhere in the state at some point in time as our population increases is going to be worth development prices at some point. It may not be selling by the square foot like it is in the west end of Richmond. But at some point, somebody's going to want to put a house on it or do something on it. So, I know with our situation, we just felt like, our family, my great grandfather bought the farm. It was passed down to us. And everything that we've done since then, buying new farms, we've put them under easement to protect them. One, because we want that land to be there forever to farm, regardless of what our neighbors are doing. But two, it also helped us pay for them with the sale of the tax credits. So that's a very important thing. And because you donate easements, you're eligible for federal tax deductions, state tax credits, property tax benefits like guaranteed land use taxation, and estate tax benefits. And that is something more is going to be more and more important as we move forward. Conservation tax credits are earned by donating a qualified conservation easement. Uh-oh, my battery's going low here. Sorry about that. I didn't know I was unplugged. Excuse me for the delay. Guess I'm going to have to talk faster. But the difference between a donation, a tax credit versus a actual tax deduction.
Uh-oh, looks like we lost Charles. We'll give him a couple minutes and see if he comes back. Might have hit a wrong button.
The most important thing that we can really do is make sure that we have a good team put together. I mean, it is critically important that you have a good attorney, number one. A good attorney and a good accountant and a good appraiser. An appraiser is critical because there are not very many appraisers that do this, these easement type donation appraisals. And the reason is because they're very complicated, because you have to do a before appraisal and an after appraisal. In other words, you have to do the valuation before, like what the highest and best use is in terms of basically development type prices. And then you have to have an idea of what that property is going to be worth once you take that stick out of the bundle and you put restrictions on the property. And if you have an existing farm, or if you're looking to buy a farm and you want to do easements, you better make sure your lender's on board with it. Farm Credit and First Bank in the Valley, I know they deal with lots of different clients and have it, but some of the bigger banks like Bank of America and some of the big national banks, they are not quite as friendly to this type of easement. So it's important to have your lender on board. For a charitable gift to be tax deductible, like we talked about earlier, it's got to be according to Section 170H. And that means you got to have a qualified real property interest to be given. So what you're given is that one stick of development, basically. You have to have a qualified organization to hold that easement, and then it needs to exclusively be for conservation purposes. So what are some of those purposes? Public recreation or education, natural habitat of fish or wildlife, historic structures of land, and probably the number one biggie is open space and view sheds, because all of your neighbors around you that aren't farmers, they love to ride by your farm and see those big open fields and cows and sheep and pigs running down the side of the road, waving at them when they go by. Federal income tax deduction. The size of federal income tax deduction is equal to the appraisement or easement value, and it is deductible. The donation can be deducted at the rate of 30% a year. But if you're a full-time farmer, this rate can be expanded to 50% to 100% for full-time farmers and be extended out for 15 years. So it's important, again, when I said you need to have a good accountant, you need to have an accountant that understands this part of the tax code, because it's very important that you utilize all that. Because you got to remember, not only are you getting tax credits that you can convert to cash if you don't need them, you still have this federal deduction against your income. So, you can't just write that off because, or I'm saying not, you can write that off, but the thing is, that can roll for up to 15 years. So you might be able to deduct all of your income, depending on what you make, for the next 15 years after you put the farm under easement. So that's sure got an economic value that can be very beneficial. Virginia income tax incentives, you got the income tax deduction. That's carried over from your federal AGI, from your W-2. And then Virginia, like we were talking about earlier, is one of 4 states that says we will give you an income tax credit. Virginia gives you 40% of the value of the donation that you gave. So we'll talk about what that actually means. But that tax credit in Virginia is transferable to other people, and it can be sold. It is perfectly legal, and it is very fluid. You just have to have a tax credit broker, or If you have an accountant that has got clients that want these tax credits, he can sell them for you and you can get a better rate. If you go through a broker, you're going to have to pay that broker, usually 3 to 5%. But the accountant may be willing to do it just so he gets your credits to benefit his clients. So how the thing works, why people are willing to buy these credits from you, is that they're getting a reduction dollar for dollar against their tax bill. So if, let's just say this doctor owes $100,000 in taxes to the state of Virginia. If he buys $90,000 in tax credits, he's lowered his bill dollar for dollar. So it's in his benefit. He's basically getting a 10% reduction in his tax bill. There are more than 500,000 acres. It's probably getting close to 1 million acres now that are under easement of some type in Virginia. This map, it's from 2008. So, you're talking about one that's 12 years old. Is the most current one I could get from Virginia Outdoors Foundation. But if you look at your county, let's say, for example, here in Louisa, which is, we're over 10,000 acres roughly. Back in 2008, I'd say we're probably double or triple that now. Albemarle County in this area and Orange County have quite a bit. They were both over 20,000 acres apiece back in 2008. So let's talk about an example of these tax credits, how they actually work. So if you've got 250 acres and you do the appraisal before with full development potential, and afterwards, you're only going to keep 2 division parcels. Okay, so you went from having whatever you might have like 7, 8 division rights. It would lower to 2. Now, again, that's negotiable. You could have it 5. You could have it 6. You could keep 10, depending on your county and where your land is. But the thing is, that is negotiable. You can work on that. And then that gives you the basis of what that deduction is worth. So if you had land that was $5,500 an acre, being 1.4 million, and you put an easement on it, and the proposed easement lowers the value of the property to $2,700 an acre in an open space easement, the tax donation that you're given to the federal government, they're going to give you a $725,000 net tax donation. You're a full-time farmer. Then the state of Virginia gives you 40% of that amount, or $290,000 in tax credits. You can then turn around and sell those through a broker. And if you go through a broker, it's going to be about 80 to 82 cents on the dollar net. So in this example, you would have gotten roughly somewhere between $900 and $1,000 cash in your pocket for that land that you bought and you put under easement, or if it's land that you already own. But it's in any situation, you still own the land, you still control the land. All you've given up basically is your right to divide it smaller than what you gave up. Here's another example, 300-acre farm, except this is maybe a little more pricey area, like say in Madison County, $10,000 an acre. Or what is land bringing up there right now? I'm not sure, Sarah, but I know I've heard as high as this amount in Orange, but at 10,000.
A lot is the answer.
A lot, yeah, depends on where it is and all, but and all this is relative. But like in that example here at $10,000 an acre, the before and after appraisal is done, you lower the value by 50%, which is about a rule of thumb. I mean, it could be a little more, a little less, but anyway you look at it, in this particular situation, you come up with a $1.5 million tax donation. So that's what the federal government is giving you for a tax donation, okay? So that rolls against your federal income tax for up to 15 years if you're a full-time farmer. So that can be pretty substantial. You can wipe out, 15 years worth of income or taxes on your income. But then you take the net deduction Okay, the 1.5 million times 40%. So in Virginia, it's 40% now, $600,000 Virginia preservation tax credits. You sell those credits through a broker, let's say 82 cents on the dollar. So then you're getting $492,000 cash money to you. Divided by the 300 acres, that's $1,640 an acre net. So, and again, you still own the land, you still control the land, you can pass it down through your family, you can sell it to whoever, but all you've given up basically is the development rights. And you can do that in a phase out deal where you start by giving, I'll just give you an example with ours. The home place, it had 60 development rights on it when we did it back in 2006, I think it was. 60 development rights, we went from 60 to 4. And we got a 50%, 55% reduction in value, which gave us, for what the property was appraised back then, was $13,000 an acre, because that was back during the real estate boom, which is when you really want to do these things. When real estate is just exploding in price like it's getting ready to here now. But the key is you got to own it beforehand, because you think it's too expensive to buy. But we were able to take the net cash we got on that farm from the tax credit sale and buy another 300-acre farm and pay cash for it. And basically the transaction was pretty much non-tax. I mean, it's taxable, but you got the federal tax deduction to offset it. So it really is a great tool, in my opinion. If you look to expand, you look to be a first-time farmer to get in and buy a farm, you combine this with like USDA funding on a new farm, you can get somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 30%, depending on the value of the land net back to the sale of these tax credits. So I think that pretty much kind of concludes everything. The brokerage fees, they're figured into that percentage that I told you. One thing that has changed since I did it the first time, back in 2006, you used to not have to pay any tax to the state of Virginia, but now they charge a 5% upfront tax when they issue you the tax credits. So the broker usually takes that out, but still that's included in that net. So when I'm saying you're going to net between 80 and 83% real money for your tax credits, that's including the Virginia tax, the brokerage fee, and all that in there. Just to give you an idea, the legal costs for a good attorney, I mean, I've had it done for as low as $5,000. I've had it cost as much as $20,000, depending on how complicated the easement was and how big the transaction was. But if you kind of rule of thumb, if you figure about $7,000 to $10,000, that's what the attorney's going to charge, depending on who you get. And then the detailed appraisal that you do, it's going to run about $7 to $10 grand. But most of the guys that I've worked with in the past, they will do an initial preliminary appraisal for usually about $1,500 to maybe $2,000. So let's just say you were wanting to buy a 400-acre farm in somewhere in Virginia, and you want to know what you could yield out of that farm for tax credits so that you can sell them to help pay down the mortgage. Most of the guys will come in and do that for $1,500. They'll come look at the property, they'll do some basic research, and then if you decide you want to go for the full process, then you're going to pay the whole amount. It used to run about $5,000 to $6,000. Now most of the ones I'm seeing are at least $7,000 anyway. But they do let you in on a lower cost up front to see if you really want to move forward. So in conclusion, Virginia conservation tax credits is something every landowner should consider and be informed about. It's not for everybody. If you've got land on the west end of Richmond that's selling by the square foot, you better think hard about it. But living out here in Louisa, for me, it made perfect sense. And it has grown our farm operation where we've got enough land base. I mean, we farm, my family, we farm like 5,000 acres altogether, but having that 1,800 acres or so land base to work off of, it allows us to rent property close by, and it just helps the whole situation. It's a great tool, especially if you intend for your land to remain in farming. I counsel many farmers from all over the Central Virginia area. They call me, and some of them don't have kids, some of them, but the one common thing that they tell me, for the most part, they don't want to have that farm tore up and put in houses. They want to keep that farm. Well, I see this as a great tool for young farmers to be able to get tied in with someone else that's got land, and to give them this money from the tax credits to help them get that equity that they need out of that land to live on in their retirement. And it's a great way to buy a farm. It's, sometimes people get a little bit suspicious of it, but I'm telling you, it's all legal. It is all above board. The state loves it. The last 3 governors have all really pushed this program, and they want people to take advantage of it. And I am adamant about it myself because, once land grows houses, it doesn't grow anything else but problems. So, and tax liabilities. But anyway, that concludes my talk for tonight. Do you guys have any questions?
I don't. This was very thorough, and I feel like I have a pretty decent understanding of it now.
Well, I apologize for the technical difficulties. I didn't mean for it to take so long.
Oh, no,